It did too, it's working. Thank you, everyone. My name is Bridget Skelton. I'm Pro-D co-chair for Sandwich Teachers Association. I have the honor of introducing our keynote speaker, Dr. Julie Causton. Dr. Julie Causton is the founder and CEO of Inclusive Schooling. She has been a professor in the Inclusive and Special Education program in the Department of Teaching and Leadership at Syracuse University for the past 14 years. She has particular areas of expertise in school reform, inclusive teacher training, collaboration, humanistic behavioral supports, lesson planning, and providing invisible adult supports. Julie has also provided independent educational evaluations in due process hearings across the continent. She has both the legal knowledge and the practical experience to do this work. She has written 6 books for school professionals about inclusive education. These are widely read by school teams and teacher education programs across North America. Last year, she supported schools in the area of inclusive school reform in 12 states and several parts of Canada. Her teaching, research, and consulting are guided by a passion for inclusive education. I'd like to present Dr. Causton.
I am so thrilled to be here. Thank you, everyone. Just honoring this space with all of these educators in one room, really getting thinking about my favorite subject, inclusive schooling. Thank you. Here's what I'd like to do. I want to just tell you, my name is Julie. You can just call me Julie. My son introduced me to his teacher and said, my mom is a doctor, but not the kind that helps people. And you'll find that to be true also today. Getting here was an incredible journey, and last night, my bags didn't arrive, so last night I got to go shopping for this outfit. So 30 minutes in the mall, right? Just so happy to be here with you today. What I want to talk about is inclusive education, and I want everyone to think very broadly about what that term means, inclusive education. I'm talking about structural inclusion, relational inclusion, and really embracing difference in our school systems. So here's our opener, and I'm going to do an active opener because we're in a gym, so that's the perfect place to do an active opener. So you might want to slide your chairs back a little bit, because I'm going to ask you to jump up and shout in a second. And I can hear the excitement in your voices. Okay, are you ready? Jump up and shout, that's me if you're a teacher. Ready, go. Beautiful. That was fun. Okay. Jump up and shout, that's me if you're an administrator. Go. I like to know where administrators are seated, don't you? So good. Jump up and shout, that's me if you loved your snow days. Go. Good, good. Jump up and shout, that's me if you're a related service provider. They're not invited today. Okay, maybe. Okay, if you consider yourself one, that's fine. Jump up and shout, that's me if you're an educational assistant. Beautiful, let's give a round of applause. Thank you. And jump up and shout, that's me if you'd like to move while you learn. Ready, go. That group of people, come on back in 3 seconds, 3, 2, and 1. That group of people I could already tell because on the jumping you were doing like Herkies and different things, so great job. Okay, just so you know, I'm going to be using some inclusive strategies in my teaching today, and you should be thinking to yourself, how can I use a that's me strategy in my own teaching? So I was recently working in a school with a bunch of math teachers, and they decided to have kids have numbers on their backs, I think, and she would say, jump up and shout, that's me if you're divisible by 7. Jump up and shout, that's me if you're a prime number, those kinds of things. So anything that I use today, use your creative minds and think, how can I actually take this and use this in my own teaching? Okay, you already heard my introduction, but I'll tell you that I'm spending a ton of time thinking about teacher happiness. Because I have found that educators that are really filled and really happy, emotionally ready to teach, are the ones that are providing some of the very best services for our students. And so some of the work that I do has been on teacher happiness that I'm really interested in right now. If you're interested in that, on my website, it's www.inclusiveschooling.com, I have a 21-day teacher happiness challenge that I've been really having a great time with. You need to look at pictures of my children, if you don't mind, and my girlfriend. So these are my children, Ella and Sam, and my girlfriend Ellen, and we just got engaged at Christmas, so I'm super excited. Raise your hand if you have teenagers. Anybody in the room? Okay. Getting photographs of teenagers is tricky, so I just feel really happy that I got those, where they posed for me. 3 books that you need to know about. I've written 7 books on inclusive education, but my last 3 are ones I want to highlight for you today. If you haven't read 30 Days to the Co-Taught Classroom, with Paula Kluth and I wrote this book about co-teaching. It's a funny book about inclusion and co-teaching, and I think you might really love it. Also, the Educator's Handbook. Raise your hand if you've read the Educator's Handbook for Inclusive. Okay, good. Some of you, there was a book club here, that's fine. And I've recently written a book for children called The Too Much Unicorn. And it's kind of, it's about a little girl who imagines herself to be a unicorn, and she's always told she's too much. Raise your hand if you know anyone who's too much in the world. Yeah. So you don't need to point to who it is. That's good. But this book, if you're interested, it's on Amazon. It's called The Too Much Unicorn, and if you Google my last name, Causton, you can find it. Thank you, Sean. You also need to meet my kitten named Skippy John Jones, because look how cute. Skippy John Jones usually gets more play than my kids, that's fine. Here's the tone for today. I'm going to ask that you engage and participate. I see people taking photos, you're welcome to do that. Use technology in any way you want, and move your body in any way you want. If you want to be standing in the back, stand in the back. If you want to be doing jumping jacks in the back, do jumping jacks in the back. What we too often think is that learning looks like sitting and silence. And I believe learning doesn't look like sitting in silence. I believe learning looks like a lot of different things. Use your technology. If you're tweeting, it's @Julie_Causton if you want to add me to your tweets. Be respectful of your colleagues. It's a big room, lots of people. Relax and have fun. Right now, I need you to find a learning partner A and a learning partner B. You have 30 seconds to do that. Decide who's your learning partner A and B. Go.
Are you doing live stream? Is that your
Okay, come on back in 5 seconds. 3, 2, and 1. And a hush fell over the room. Beautiful. Okay, transitions are key. I'm going to attempt to get, I think, 700 of you quiet at key points, and I'm going to share 3 ways, or maybe 4 ways I'm going to do it. There are only 3 listed here. The first is, I might say signal on, and I just want everyone to do this. Do you mind practicing right now? All together, thank you, thank you, thank you. This just means, get ready, I'm going to say something. I might use this one, and a hush fell over the room, and everyone goes, shh, and then it's social pressure to be quiet, which is awesome. And then this one I like at weddings. They play this song. I think it's called the Cupid Shuffle, but it might not be. Let's practice it. I'm going to go freeze. Everybody clap your hands. Good. It's more in the real song, but I just do 7. And because this room is going to be fun to play with, Sean suggested I also do my favorite transition, and it goes like this. Sweet Caroline. That's just another one because it's really fun in a group this size. Okay. I'm going to start from the most well-known school leader of our time. I know you're thinking, who is that? Who's the most well-known school leader of our time? Turn to your learning partner A and guess. Go. Okay, and a hush all over the room. Beautiful. Okay, so you've made some guesses. Here's who I was thinking. I'm certain that you were thinking other people. Elvis Dumbledore. Right? Some Harry Potter fans are like this. I love it so much. Okay, this quote is going to lead us through our work today. It is our choices, far more than our abilities, that show who we truly are. Do you remember when Albus Dumbledore says that to Harry and Ron and Hermione? I want to think about the choices that we're making as educators in schools every single day to make our schools more inviting, more welcoming, and more inclusive. What choices will we make? These are some questions. Will we embrace difference and see difference as a strength, not a deficit? So I live and work in the world of disability, and for so long, we've seen disability as a deficit. And I want us to do some thinking and some shifting to consider what would it be like if we saw disability as a strength? What if we saw it as a difference, something to embrace? Will we let students support and love one another in all kinds of ways? I'm going to share with you some examples. Will we redesign our structures? I spent the day yesterday in Victoria, and I had such a lovely time working with the teachers there, and I am very impressed with the inclusive work going on in Victoria. In fact, all over the United States, I'm asking people to take a look at what's happening in Victoria, because there have been some incredible structural redesigns around inclusive education. Will we think like children? And I'll tell you what that means in a little bit. Will we hurry? And will we make learning outrageously fun? Those are the questions that will guide us today. With your learning partner B, I don't know if you can read this, so maybe I'll read it out loud and then you can discuss it. With your learning partner B, I'm going to read this out loud, and I want you to turn and respond to this idea. This is a definition of inclusive education. I was recently at a dinner party and I met a guy, and I'm certain he was hitting on me. And he said something, well, I just was pretending he was hitting on me. But he said something like, what do you do for a living? And I said, oh, all the work that I do is about inclusive education. And he's like, oh, I don't believe in that. And I'm like, well, what do you do for a living, you know? And he said, I'm a chiropractor. And I was like, oh, I don't believe in that either. And then I had a skiing accident, and now I believe. But anyway, it doesn't matter. Okay. This is a definition of inclusive education, and I think it's really fascinating to think about this particular part of the definition. Inclusive education is the valuing of diversity within the human community. When inclusive education is fully embraced, we abandon the idea that children have to become normal in order to contribute to the world. We begin to look beyond typical ways of becoming valued members of the community. And in doing so, we begin to realize the achievable goal of providing all children with an authentic sense of belonging. I want you to turn to learning partner B and just quickly, what comes to mind when you hear this? I give you 10 seconds to discuss. Go. What comes to mind? Okay, let's do this one. Signal on. Thank you. Signal on. Signal on. Beautiful. Great. Turn your attention this way. I recognize there's a lot of text on this slide, so you don't need to look at it completely, but I'll tell you this. Many times people tell me, we have a really inclusive district. I say, great. And then they show me, they take me through the district, and I walk through and they say, do you see the students over there? Yes. Those are inclusion students. appreciate that people laughed. If you laughed, why is that funny? Yeah, right. If they're grouped together, they're not included. Also, that side, do you see those teachers over there? Those are our inclusion teachers. It's kind of like you are or you're not inclusive, right? So you either are embracing this philosophy and this practice in all the ways that you're working, or you're not. And one way that I know people aren't is when they have, those are Mary's kids, those are John's kids, those aren't my kids. When we have these divisions in the ways that we think about students. Raise your hand if you know who Winnie the Pooh is. Okay. So this is the very beginning page of Winnie the Pooh. Here is Edward Bear. Coming downstairs now, bump, bump, bump on the back of his head behind Christopher Robin. It is, as far as he knows, the only way of coming downstairs. But sometimes he feels that there really is another way, if only he could stop bumping for a moment and think of it. As an educator myself, I used to say this to my co-teacher. I said, on days where students didn't show up like this, I'd say, we could get so much more done if the kids didn't come, right? So here's the thing. We in education have to stop bumping a little bit to start to reimagine what we could do differently in schools. Our school structures have maintained forever. Has anyone ever heard of this, Brown versus Board of Education? Raise your hand if you know what that is. Okay, good. In 1954, we decided it wasn't okay to segregate human beings based on race. And we also find it to be true that it's not okay to segregate human beings based on disability. And so I kind of take us back to that time when we decided that legally, and just know that that is the work that we're really thinking about doing. So since you mostly knew who Winnie the Pooh is, I want to talk about this idea of thinking about students through the lens of strengths. Before I jump into this, raise your hand if you've ever done something you're not proud of in your life. Okay, good, I'm in good company. Okay, good. When I think about special education, I think about my own life. I could have a very long list of all of my deficits. It would be a 30-page document of deficits, right? But I also have a 30-page document of strengths and gifts and talents and abilities. Luckily, in a space like this, you hear me introduced by Bridget, for example, and you get to hear the highlights, right? You don't get to hear about my divorce or any sort of other things that are pretty problematic and challenging in my life. You hear the highlights. I get to pick and choose. I think a lot about special education in that we create narratives about children, and we have choices in how we create those narratives. I want you to look at this. So I took all the characters from Winnie the Pooh, and I put some characteristics down. Turn to learning partner A and answer the question, are these positive, negative, or neutral? Go. Okay, I'm going to pause you. And a hush fell over the room. Okay, I'm going to read them because I recognize some can't see very well. Pooh is happy, pleasure seeker, relaxed. Eeyore is loyal, lovable, obstacle finder. Do you like what I did with the obstacle finder? Isn't that good? Piglet is sensitive and empathetic and kind. Tigger is energetic and quick and fun. Owl is wise. He gives advice. He's a philosopher. And Rabbit is organized, detailed, and a rule follower. Turn to your partner A and admit, what combination of Pooh characters are you? Ready, go. Okay, if you can hear me clap one time, if you can hear me clap twice. Beautiful, okay. This is one way to view these Pooh characters. Here's another way to view these same characters. I'll read them if you can't read them. So Pooh, and a hush fell over the room. I'm just gonna read for people who can't see them. Pooh is gluttonous and dull. Eeyore is pessimistic and an energy drain. Piglet is nervous and neurotic. Tigger is hyper and overactive and loud. Owl is self-centered and egotistical. And Rabbit is bossy and inflexible, right? Do you see how those are two different ways to look at the same characters? Here's a secret. When we work in schools, we have to spend our time and energy restoring our students so that we see them like this and not like this. We have to. When we use strength-based approaches to learning, we do more for students' self-esteem and academic potential than anything else. We have to restore our students in the way we write about them, in the ways we think about them, and in the ways we talk about them. Unfortunately, sometimes in schools, we take it one step further. In schools, we often do something like this. If you can't read it, Pooh has an eating disorder. See his face is in the honey. Piglet, an anxiety disorder. Tigger has an attention deficit hyperactivity disorder. Eeyore has a major depressive disorder. Rabbit has obsessive compulsive disorder. Owl, narcissistic personality disorder. And Christopher Robin's schizophrenia. And at first I was like, I don't get it. And then I was like, oh, he imagines these characters. I got it. It took me a while. Okay. This is called medicalizing difference. Medicalizing difference. When we actually take difference and put labels on them in these ways, for sure, I recognize that students, human beings, have all kinds of challenges, but this kind of medicalization isn't useful for students. So the point from the last one is I want you to just remember that we have to start with student strengths, and we have to end with student strengths, and we have to use student strengths every single day. This is my son, Sam. He's legally blind. So he sees 2200 with glasses or without. And so what that means is I could tell there were people in here, but I probably have to be about 3 feet away to know who you were by looking at your face. So one day, second grade, Sam comes to me and says, Mom, I can't find my friends at the playground. I can't find them because everyone changes their hats and their jackets and I don't know where kids are, so I'm hanging out with the educational assistant who does not want to play the same things I want to play, right? And I said, okay. And I was like, I sort of flipped my hair back and said, Sam, this is what I do for a living. I problem solve around inclusion, I was like, I've written books on this. Do you want me to, we can get out chart paper and markers? And he was like, no, please don't. In fact, he goes, you know what, Mom, I'm going to handle it myself. I was heartbroken. You're going to handle it yourself. He's like, just please step away with the chart paper. So I was like, all right, good luck, So I get a phone call from Mrs. Procopio. Tracy Procopio is this genius teacher. She calls me the next night and says, Julie, I can't wait to tell you what Sam did in school today. I said, what? Apparently he walks into the classroom and says to Mrs. Procopio, I'm having a problem, a challenge, and I really need to problem solve. And so I was wondering if we could problem solve during the morning meeting and if you could scribe some of the solutions, right? So by saying that, it's pretty cool, but also I need you to think about Mrs. Procopio. She has a morning meeting. She allows kids to problem solve. She allows kids to really see difference as just challenges to overcome, right? And so Sam problem solves with the class, and he asks his class of second graders, I can't find my friends at recess. Do you have any ideas? So apparently every hand is up, second grade, right? And Sam starts to call on people, and the first idea is we need day-glow hats that runners wear during the day. Then you can see where we are, Sam, and then you can find your classmates. So Tracy writes day-glow hats down, right? Okay. Next idea, we need pennies from gym class. We need those pennies from gym class. So she writes down pennies from gym class. And then the third idea is we need walkie-talkies. How many people in here work with second graders? Okay. What do you think they selected as out of those 3? Walkie-talkies. Okay. They select walkie-talkies. Now I'm in his school delivering cupcakes back in the day when you could deliver cupcakes, right? And I'm hiding behind a bush. And if you have a kid with a visual impairment, they don't see you, so you can hide anywhere. So I'm hiding behind a bush, I have a bunch of cupcakes. I see him at the playground. And all of a sudden I'm watching to see what was gonna happen because he's by himself. And I'm really kind of heartbroken. So I watch. And all of a sudden I hear this. I'm looking for baby, over and out. All of a sudden I hear, baby's been located, he's on the slide, good buddy. Right? And I'm like, oh, children know how to do this. I have a PhD in special education, and I would have created something to solve this problem using board maker picture symbols, and it would have been laminated, and I would have thought it was like amazing, right? That's knowing laughter I hear in the room, yeah. And so it's like, oh, right, walkie-talkies were the solution to this challenge. We have to think like students, and every single time we make new decisions for kids, we have to include students in those decisions. They have to be part of the problem solving. So one of my big questions is, will we begin to think like students? Turn to your learning partner A and share one thought that's coming to mind. You have 10 seconds, go. Okay, let's do this one. Sweet Caroline. I was hoping for more enthusiasm. Let's do it one more time. Sweet Caroline. Oh, yeah, even arms up. This is so good. I love this room. Okay, we've got to really think about including students. This is something that happens to me that's really going to get us thinking. If you can't see, there are two kids on this slide, and one of them is named Luke, and one of them is named Darius. So I was doing a study. My research is very fascinating in my mind, and no one else's. But I was looking, in fact, one of the best ways to determine how inclusive your district is to think of your student with the most significant disability, and how many interactions do they have with peers who do not have disabilities throughout the day. That's the metric that I use in most places. So I was in this school system working with this little guy. His name is Luke, and he's a 4th grader. And I was watching this happen. I was watching students engage in a discussion, and Luke was breathing really loud. And when he starts to breathe loud, he's about to have a meltdown of epic proportions. So I'm watching, and I'm kind of worried about what's happening, and I'm taking notes. And all of a sudden, Jill Murray, she's the special education assistant, she flies over to Luke. She's actually angelic, right? So she flies over to Luke, and she provides cranial sacral pressure. Do you all know what this is? A little light touch on the forehead and the back of the neck, and Luke's body calms down. I'm like, genius, cranial sacral pressure, that's lovely. He calms down. I look to see, it takes him about 1.5 minutes to calm down, and I think, nice intervention. A little bit later, I overhear Darius, who's at the same table group. He leans over to the new kid in the class and goes like this, dude, whenever Luke is naughty, Jill gives him the claw. And I'm like, oh no, Jill, no. She's not hurting Luke into submission, So I try to explain, and then I'm nervous, so I go to Jill, and I say, hey, Jill, guess what? They think you're hurting Luke, so let's discuss. And she's like, okay, no problem. Morning meeting tomorrow, I'll handle it. So morning meeting comes, and she says to the kids, Darius had some questions about the supports I was giving to Luke. And she goes, it's called cranial sacral pressure, and what it does is it calms Luke's body. And she says, would anyone else ever like cranial sacral pressure? And they're all like, me. So she gives it to everybody, and everyone's like, oh, this is great. And then Darius has the audacity to say this, Miss Murray, I sit next to Luke, so whenever Luke is having a hard time, why can't I just do that for him? She goes like this, well, Darius, you're not trained in cranial sacral pressure, are you? And then she smiles and goes, neither am I. And then she goes, we'll see, honey, we'll see. She just sort of like, we'll see, right? So I'm so curious what's gonna happen. So I'm there like a week later and they're doing journal writing. All the kids are writing in their journal. Now, Luke doesn't write in journals, but what he's supposed to be doing is pasting his pictures of his weekend in his journal. But he's not because he's having a hard time. So I'm kind of thinking this might be the moment where I get to see what happens. So I'm watching, and I'm starting to sweat because I'm watching Luke get a little bit too upset, maybe. And I'm nervous, looking around. Where's Miss Murray? What's happening? Darius is writing in his journal like this. And finally, he looks over. I have to use two hands, so hold on. So finally, he looks over. He goes like, well, actually, it's got to be over here too. And he goes. And the craniosacral technique was more like this. You know what I mean? It wasn't awesome. But Luke calmed down in 3 seconds. And I was like, whoa, right. Students want to be supported by their friends. Just like I want to be supported by my friends, right? I need a lot of support to live my life, and I have a lot of friends that support me. This for me was really big because I realized that we pay a lot of people to provide support, and please understand, I think those jobs are incredibly important, super valuable, but we might need to rethink the role of people providing support to kids to be how do we create connections between students with disabilities and students without? How do we retool so that we really re-examine what it means to support students and make sure that we're thinking about peer support all day long? This is a picture of Luke and Darius at Halloween. Darius really loves Halloween and he loves to get as much candy as possible. And he realized that if Luke went with him, he has a stroller and they can run faster and they can get more candy because he's got this whole place to hold candy in the back and underneath. So apparently this is after Halloween. I was chatting with Luke's mom and she said, well, Julie, you're always talking about there's dignity and risk. This is a phrase that I use a lot. She said, you know what, I listen to you, dignity and risk, and I let these two go trick-or-treating all night long. They came back after 10:30. She expected them back around 8:30, but they had a ton of candy and they had the best night of their lives. So there's dignity and risk. Okay, I'm looking at the time. I want to talk about inclusive structures. This is something that I did in Milwaukee, Wisconsin, and it was the very best thing on earth. It was a room like this, but there were 1,000 educators, and they were seated at round tables. So I want you to picture that. Before the conference, I snuck in and I put 12 red dot stickers under people's chairs. Okay. Then I started presenting. And I said, at about 10:30, I said, oh, I've spoken to your administrators. And some of you just, you're not that great with differentiation. You kind of struggle with differentiation. That's good. The topic today is differentiation. But if you're someone who struggles, I want you to get a little extra support. So you can look, this isn't true for you, but I said to them, you can look under your chairs, and if there's a red dot, you're someone who has been identified as needing more support. And if you have a red dot under your chair, then you're just going to stand and go to the back of the room where I'm going to provide some remedial support for you to get ready for the afternoon's work on differentiation. Turn to learning partner B and answer the question, how would you feel if you were in the room at that time? Go. Okay. Come on back in 3 seconds. 3, 2, 1. Raise your hand if you said some version of embarrassed, mortified, worried, concerned, upset. Beautiful. Raise your hand if you said something like excited to be there, really excited to learn. 2, perfect. Okay, good. So here's what I did. I told everyone to look. They looked under their chairs. 12 people looked at me with eyes the size of saucers. I could tell where they were seated. And I said, no problem, no worries, just stand. You're gonna go to the back of the room and I have a packet about differentiation. Page 1 is color the picture of Carol Ann Tomlinson, obviously, right? You get it, right? So I told them to get up, and only 11 people stood. How many stickers were there? 12. I'm like, oh man. And I said, oh, you're gonna miss the film I'm showing, including Samuel, while you're gone. But don't worry, I'll act it out at lunch, and I'm an incredible actress, so that's no problem. And so I sent them to the back, only 11 stand, and I'm like, oh no. Someone didn't stand, right? And then all of a sudden I see this woman who's seated over here, and I realize that she has a sticker but did not stand. So I use my microphone and I walk right over to her and I say, ma'am, there's a sticker under your chair? And she goes like this, no, there's not. And I'm like, yeah, there is. And she goes, there is not. So I crawl under her chair and find it for her, and I'm like, here it is, you missed it. So I wish you could have been there. She walks/stomps down the aisle, knocking over people's beverages. She goes like this, like that to me. And I'm like, oh my gosh, this is the best day of my life. So she goes down the aisle all the way to the back, and now they're supposed to work on some, remedial differentiation work. I also, don't worry, I have a curtain so they can't really see what's happening with the film. Then they come back during the question and answer about the film. I want you to know too, the Huffy woman, she did not do her tasks. She stood on the phone and sort of walked back and forth in a sort of menacing fashion. So that was fascinating. Anyways, everybody returned back like you or I would do, just quietly sat down, except you, the Huffy woman. She marches down the aisle towards me and says to me something like, can I have a microphone? I'm like, no. Have a seat. She goes, no, just hand it over because I have something to say. I'm like, no, have a seat, right? Pretty soon I just got too scared of her that I gave her them. Maybe she wrestled it, I don't remember, I blacked out. I've never had someone force co-teach with me before, and I'm like, all right, okay. So she stands there and she says this to the group. She goes, do you know how it felt to stand and leave the room because of a perceived deficit? She said, I was mortified. She's like, are you gonna pay for my therapy? I'm like, no, I wasn't intending on that. But thank you. So I get the microphone back. It took some wrestling. And so anyway, I get it back, I have her sit down, and then I open it up to the room. And I say, so nobody's better or worse at differentiation. I really didn't do any sort of checks with your administration. But I wanna ask you in the room, what did it do for you as a learner, right? Lots of hands went up. There was this brand new teacher, and I could tell she was new because she had apple earrings. And so she, does anyone have apple earrings on today? Oh, do you own them, but you don't have them on? I always love it when someone's like, I have one right now. I'm like, you're brand new? Good. All right, so, sorry. Anyways, I basically asked the room how it felt, and this woman raised her hand, and she said, I was back there, and I just kept thinking, how did you get my administrator's number? Because I'm really not good at differentiation. And at first I thought it was funny, but then I was like, oh, I created a learner who doubted herself. And then I went, whoa, and I created challenging behavior over here. She was lovely prior to this experiment, right? Turn and share with the neighbor, what other problems did I create for any learner in the room because of how I did this? Let's go with partner A, go. What other problems were created for any other learner in the room? Go.
I think they had a lot of people like
Okay, if you can hear me, clap one time. If you can hear me, clap twice. Thank you. Raise your hand if you thought anything related to learning. So maybe I was interrupting the learning of any learner in the room. Did anyone say anything like that? Here's what we too often do. We take our learners who struggle the most and we give them the most transitions. Doesn't really make sense, does it? I'm gonna let you in on a little secret. It's true in the United States, and I don't know if it's true in Canada, but what happens in general education classrooms is what we actually test for on standardized tests. Is that the same true for you here? No, okay, good. Great, okay. Here's a predictor of how well students do in general education. The number of minutes they spend in general education. That's the highest predictor of how well they do, right? So what we too often do is remove students over and over and over again in ways that create real challenges. Raise your hand if when you talked about problems that were created, you talked about the disruption in the room. Raise your hand if you talked about that. Okay, good. Right, disruption, that okay. And raise your hand if you talked about behavioral issues when you talked about challenges tonight. Okay, good, great. One thing I know to be true is the more uniform, the more support we give to the general education classroom and setting, the better all students do. We can basically decide if we're going to sort and separate students, or if we're going to refigure how to create structures where all students learn together and we learn to differentiate. Okay? Here's a question that I love a lot. It says, will we hurry? Administrators at Snailville School lament the speed of change. It says this, those inclusive education radicals want everything yesterday. What do they expect? I know what you mean. We've only had these provisions in the law since 1975. This is the thing that I think is really interesting, is that I travel all over the country in Canada. Every week I'm somewhere new, teaching people how to create inclusive schools. And I really wonder when we're going to decide to make the choice. I'm not going to show this video. I'm just going to tell you should go to look for it if you want. It's really cool. It's a video called Fun Theory, and I'll explain it. It's easily explained. They decide to make those stairs look like a piano. And there's an escalator next to it. Raise your hand if you've seen this. Okay, good. And so what they actually do is by making those piano those stairs actual piano steps, they make it a lot more fun to use the stairs. And so one of the things I think about education is we can get kids to do harder and harder things by making things more and more fun. So one of the challenges that I ask teachers to think about is how do we make learning more and more outrageously fun for students? Because the learning becomes more and more sticky at that time. So I'm going to end by asking about Albus Dumbledore. It is our choices, far more than our abilities, that show who we truly are. Will we embrace difference? Will we let students support and love one another? Will we redesign our structures? Will we think like students and include students in problem solving? Will we hurry? And will we make learning outrageously fun? I want to say thank you very much for your time and energy today. I want to tell you 2 places to look. You can go to Facebook and friend me if you want. You can also go to inclusiveschooling.com. You can see lots of articles, lots of books, lots of resources that you can just take and use. So thank you so much for your time today.
Good luck, man. See you around.